It would be wonderful.
Well, I don't know about that. Okay, so now, why isn't it there? Why doesn't it show up on my screen?
You have to share through WebEx.
I had it on to share. Where it doesn't, oh, there it is. I did get it all going.
Yeah, because I mean, let's see, this.
Oh, I
is
will,
my
absolutely.
setup.
Uh,
This thing, I don't know what to do with this right here, but.
Well, it's okay, because if I stand here, then it'll show me, okay, like, that's what it is.
Let's see, got it.
Right.
But so the rest of the stuff I can generally, I mean, like that other day when that shut down, I don't know, I've never seen
Oh,
that.
I know.
Usually it's just like, okay.
It's not gonna do that today.
No.
The worst that'll happen is what happened last week when that went out,
Well,
and then you just had to start it again.
That will probably happen.
I think
And that's all you have to do is
that's,
just.
I think it's the PC that stopped working.
No, it's the overhead.
It was the overhead that
Yes.
stopped working? Well, that's.
Yeah, so that, if it'll show off too, so you'll know. If you won't see any light, you can just hit it again. It'll come.
Well, I won't notice that, but you can tell me it's
Yes,
not
okay,
working.
okay.
All right, from the beginning. Okay. I'm going to give us 5 more minutes because I have my Guatemalan grandchildren here to see the campus. I say, be back by 6. So, yeah, only if they come back.
Oh, you can take them. They're gonna come to watch them.
Yeah, that's the idea. It's just
Yeah.
that I was here too early, so.
Well,
If any of the rest of you are in Professor Dora's class, you have to sign in, and I have a piece of paper to do that. Yeah?
where do we send it?
Pardon me?
Where do we send it? That's
Did I end up with the paper or no? Oh, it's right here, sorry. You need more paper? I was supposed to bring a big piece of paper and I didn't. I'm just gonna wait till 6 and then we'll start.
Yeah, definitely don't rush, you know, because people, I know my, I should people on the way, so. Yeah, it's 2 students and then another one. But I can't believe I didn't find because I'm not like a pocket job.
We'll give them more time.
But I can't. I was all over, I was over, that's all the way down there. I was- Came down, but I didn't.
The only reason I get here is because they have a map that shows you where you are and where the classrooms
I
are.
used the map this time, yes, thank goodness.
Yes,
it's
me
there.
too.
It's right outside the
Oh,
elevator.
I'm not where I thought it's not where I thought it was.
No, I didn't, I used the elevator. Thank you.
I wish my 2 young ones would come.
They may have a.
Well, I told them this, there's people around. I said, they know it's G127.
Ain't
nobody else. They're pretty smart.
I need it for this, like.
Do you want to wait for your,
I wouldn't.
I have 1 more minute.
You-
I think it's 1 more minute. Nope, it's exactly, yeah, start.
Yeah.
Okay, good evening to all of you. This is our 3rd lecture. Today it's called Starting from Zero. So many of you weren't here last week, but what we talked about last week was how the women of Kahola organized to see what they could do about poverty. We talked a little bit about some unexpected pitfalls of working with NGOs. We talked about gender roles in Kahola, and then how our projects, the process we went through to pick projects, how that turned out. So we had a successful project where the women got sinks for their houses, but it was a one-off project, so nothing happened after that. We had 4 projects of chickens with eggs, and those stopped because the women felt overwhelmed by the need to care for 2,000 chickens. And we were left with 1 chicken project and the textile project. And as we left last week, the women, some women were learning how to weave on the foot loom. So we got started, but we were really starting from zero, including me, because I although I had business experience, I never had any textile experience. So I just started to ask questions and try things and do what I thought I might be able to do. And then we had a lot of people help us. We had a couple of women from New Jersey come and help us with designing fabrics and designing products. We had our yarn vendor came and made a presentation to us to, I guess most of you weren't here. So what we're talking about is starting a weaving business. That's why I'm talking about yarn. So our yarn vendor came and he talked to us about yarn and dyeing and how he could work with us. And then we always had a lot of help, and we could call on other fair trade companies to help us learn what we needed to do. Oh, for having a cooperative and a business, we had to know how many women we could count on to be weaving. And so we started requiring that the women had 20 of them had to come, not 20, they had to work 20 hours a week. That was required. And up nowadays, they have to work 30 hours a week. But we started off with a lot of flexibility, and then we had to start to put in some rules about working. But so we started with regular work hours. But we had to be flexible because we had to accommodate the culture of Kahola. So, for example, some of the women had to prepare a hot lunch for their families. And so we started with a 2-hour lunch break to accommodate that. There's a custom in Kahola when someone is sick, everybody goes to visit them and they bring something to drink or they bring gifts. And if someone dies, there's a very large gathering before the burial and everyone goes to the cemetery for the burial. So we had to accommodate things like this in our required work hours. Another thing is Kahola is an agricultural community, and so there's not businesses where people go certain hours. So there isn't really this idea of the workday. So when things would happen, like an example would be a neighborhood would be having a project to get water into their neighborhood. So they would have meetings of everybody. That would be during what I would call the workday. Or the parents would be going to school to see some of their kids' activities or something like that. So we had to accommodate all of those things that are important in that community. And what the women devised was a way that they would report in to the coordinator of their area if they were going to be absent and why. And the women even set rules about, so there's also a practice, if somebody in your close family dies, you sit for 9 days. So the women made rules about how close the family member had to be in order to warrant a certain number of days of absence. So the women of Kahola speak Mam, which is one of the 22 Maya languages of Guatemala. Back when I started, I spoke enough Spanish to get by. My Spanish has improved over the years. However, that didn't really matter because in Kahola, if you don't go to school, you don't learn Spanish until you go to school. And more than half of our women had never been to school. So language communications was a challenge from the very beginning. So I was trying to teach them business principles, and business principles like take inventory, writing your data down, how long did you work. All of this is very challenging if you don't have any basic reading, math, or Spanish skills. So that really was a challenge for us. And but I have to say, I always admired the ability of the footloom weavers to be able to, without mathematical background, without school, they were able to count out this really intricate threading of their looms. So I'm not sure how they did it, but they did it really, really well. So early on, we had a workshop on sales and marketing. Then another organization worked with us to give us workshops in professional and personal development and more marketing and sales. But I realized at the end of all these workshops that the women hadn't really come away with any new knowledge or any new skills because the training was in Spanish, and for them it should have been in Mom. So what we did is right away, we hired a literacy instructor to come to our place every day of the week, and we required the women to take classes 5 days a week during the workday. And they had to do those classes until they had achieved 6th grade competency in reading, math, and Spanish. And actually, although sometimes there was grumbling, afterwards, several of the women have commented that really felt so good. Now they could go around town and read the signs. So I had monthly meetings with the women. I had to be very careful about language as well. So I would speak in Spanish, and often somebody would translate now and there what I was saying. If we had some really important thing to talk about, then I would explain it in Spanish, and then someone would explain it to everyone else in Mom. If we had to make a big decision, there would follow a long conversation, a debate back and forth, all in Mom. I never did figure out what the pros and cons they were talking about. But in their culture, they make decisions by consensus. So these debates took a long time. When the debate was finished, then I would be informed of the results of the decision. And then every once in a while, for some reason or another, we would invite some trusted member of the community of Kahola to come in and translate for us, because sometimes there was some subjects that we had with respect to the business that just wasn't getting through. So we invited somebody else to try to, outside the business, who had more education, to try to explain. And I'm really embarrassed that I've been in that community so long and I haven't learned to speak in Mom, even though I was dying of curiosity to know about those debates and what was pro and what was con. So when the footloom weavers started to learn how to weave, the weaving is only part of it. They also have to do setup of the loom. So they have to learn how to take yarn from a skein to a cone or to a shuttle. They have to learn to get it in all the colorways. If you're having stripes, you have to make sure all those stripes, all the colors are in the right place. And then you have to lay it on the loom. So the women that we had learning how to be footloom weavers, if they already knew how to be backstrap weavers, they already knew the idea. Now it's back or no? Oh, I'm sorry, I did the wrong one.
It's okay.
No, it's not okay. Did you do it here? That's what went off, right? The PC? Oh, the PC.
The overhead.
Well, the overhead is, well, I guess it's coming back. Sorry, there's not a lot of live action on the screens. It's okay. Anyway, so the women who already knew how to do backstrap weaving, they could understand this process of warping the loom. It just was a bigger deal. But the women who hadn't had any experience before, this was a big deal. And truthfully, the setup of the loom is the biggest part of weaving. Once you get to the weaving, it's relatively simple, but the setup of the loom is really hard. So if you remember that our seamstresses came from the project of getting sinks, and that the women that finished with the sinks they wanted to learn to sew. Well, they learned to sew on pedal sewing machines. And you'll hear in another lecture how we're going to transfer them into industrial machines, which really terrified them to start with because of the use of electricity. And now we have our groups all ready to start the business. And I have to say that all three groups, as we've gone through time, they're always adding new skills to their repertoire. So now we're ready to begin to make things. So here we have the visitors from New Jersey, Lori and Lisa, who had experience in textiles and came to visit us in Kahola. So the first thing they did was look around Kahola to see what kind of weaving we had. And they selected so in Kahola, the backstrap weavers weave servietas, which are squares of brightly striped fabrics that they use to wrap tortillas in or wrap bread or tamales or something like that. So they picked, in fact, this green one that we see here, and the footloom weavers took that colorway and put it on the loom. And then one of the volunteers, Lisa, changed all those colors for another colorway. So those two fabrics were our first fabrics. And Lisa, who had experience also in textiles, she suggested that we start with making a kitchen towel. So our first product was a kitchen towel. And so this answers your questions from last week about what things we made.
Yeah.
So and then I added on to the kitchen towel that I thought to be distinctive, maybe we should have a little embroidery. So we started out with an embroidery that was a Maya symbol. So those were our first products. And after that, I was the main designer for some years, which is somewhat amusing because it's not really one of my skills. But we did expand our products into aprons, table napkins, placemats, and things like that. So over this time, I was always learning something new, and they were always learning something new. And the seamstresses, from the beginning, were just sewing and sewing and sewing and sewing products, which was good because over time, the quality of their work was really improved. And you'll hear quality through all these lectures because quality is really important for us. So that's where the seamstresses gained their competency. And both the footloom and the backstrap weavers already, when they started, they really did pretty high quality work. So before I get into learning how to do some of the complicated weaves, I just want to tell a story. So while the footloom weavers were learning how to weave, I was reading a book on how to weave on a footloom. And when I finished the book, I realized that the book I was reading talked about looms with 4 pedals on them and 4 harnesses. And I went and looked at our looms, and they only had 2 pedals and 2 harnesses. So I said, So I started to ask around. So where do we get looms with 4 pedals? And the first thing I was told by more than one person is, oh, we don't have those in Guatemala. We don't have looms with 4 pedals. So I kept asking. And then the next thing I found out is we could get them in a town called San Juan Comalapa. So we went to San Juan Comalapa and we bought 3 looms that each had 4 pedals each. So that's cool. So then one day I said to the women, I want to try something on one of those 4-pedal looms. And they said, we can't. We already have fabrics on those 3 looms. And I was like, oh, that's a bummer. The women came back in a couple of hours and said, okay, we're ready. And I said, ready? What? So they had just put 2 extra pedals on the loom. So now they had another 4-pedal loom. So it went from, it doesn't exist here, to it was something they could do on their own. So that's one of my favorite Guatemala stories. So anyway, so now we had these 4-pedal looms. And now the women needed to learn how to do designs on those looms. So we connected with a master weaver from Quetzaltenango, and he came and he taught the women lots and lots of very beautiful weaves. And our United States marketing team selected a weave called the diamond weave. And then we decided to have the seamstresses take that diamond fabric and turn it into placemats and table runners. But in the meantime, the weavers were fooling around, experimenting with the diamond weave, and they created 3 more weaves, like variations of that, that actually in Guatemala are unique to our weaving cooperative. I can't tell you they're unique in the world, but they're unique to us in Guatemala. And so they make beautiful shawls out of them. And there's designers in Guatemala that come to us and ask them to weave some of those designs by the yard so the designers can use them in their own clothing. So I thought that was pretty cool. So Cajola is only 9.5 miles from Quetzaltenango, which is Guatemala's second largest city. But it's been really isolated for all of time. And they didn't even have a paved road to get to Cajola until the early 2000s. And when I first started going there, back in 2005, still taking the bus from Cajola to Quetzaltenango was a big deal. So most of the people hadn't traveled around at all. So I decided we should go and take a trip to Antigua, Guatemala. Antigua is a beautiful tourist town known for its colonial architecture. And they have lots of shops, and those shops have lots of products with really high quality. So I wanted to have the women see what high quality was. This is the kind of benchmark that we're going to have to work to. So we went to Antigua, Guatemala, and we had an experience of that perverse discrimination that they experience all the time, in that we walked into this one shop and the owner made us leave. She didn't want Maya women in the store because she was afraid they would copy her designs. It's a little ironic since they were also Maya women that could do beautiful designs. So we stayed in a hotel overnight, and for most of the women, that was the very first time they'd ever been in a hotel, so that was an experience. But it was something important for them to experience. And I will tell you now, things are totally different. The women go all over the country to do whatever they need to do, whether it's looking for sales points, or whether it's looking for specific materials we need, or participating in trade shows. So nowadays, they're very accustomed. But back then, that was really a novelty. As some women came into the group that had high school education, we could start thinking about other kinds of training. So we collaborated with a fair trade cooperative in Quetzaltenango called Yaval, and the women went to a training in how to start a savings circle. So a savings circle is a specific way of handling money, and you form a group, and each of the members of the group put in a certain amount of their money every meeting. And during the course of the year, if you need money for some reason, you can take it out, and you have to pay it back before the end of the year. They do have a system of charging interest. And at the end of the year, everybody gets their money back, and you share in however the calculation is with your interest. And if you want to, you start again. But this was a really, really good experience for the women, because this was the first time they ever had a regular income. And so here was a way they could start learning to save. And if they did take money out during the year, what they did was, it was for things like an illness, or some kind of a family emergency. So they didn't take it out to buy new clothes. They took it out so it's like a real savings thing. And one other thing about money was that for a long time, they were paid in cash. But at one point, we decided it was too risky to be taking that money in cash from the bank back to pay them. So we told them all they had to get a bank account. So they weren't always really thrilled with that idea because of their lack of experience and because of the discrimination that they face. But it's had a fantastic outcome because their pay goes directly into their bank account and nobody at home can take possession of it when they get home from work at the end of the day. So that's been a really good thing. And that's my spiel for today. Next week, I'm going to explain how a bat becomes a cat. And now I'm open to questions. Yeah.
And some question, going back to your first group with the chickens, why do they need 2,000?
Because we went to an agronomist. You should have been here last week. So,
I missed it, no, I'm sorry.
because the agronomist that we went to told us we needed 2,000 to be profitable. And so while one group said, okay, that's okay, the other 4 said they couldn't deal with it. That was terrified them. And what was worse is that we had lists of things they could do. Like they had made lists of different possibilities for businesses and they couldn't go back. Like I said, oh, let's go back and see what was like second on the choice, but they couldn't. They just disappeared. Yeah.
Leaving design.
Yeah.
No. I said that for Guatemala because when you think about weaving, it's yarn going over and under in different ways. So you could never patent a weaving design because it's been done by somebody else somewhere. So I just meant in Guatemala, most of the foot loom weaving, first of all, most of the foot loom weaving is done by men, not by women, although we're not the only women that do it. But they all do a plain weave, which is where it gets its vibrancy is from the colors and the stripes. But these are weaves that get their design aspect from the way the petals work, the way the harnesses work, the way the weft and the tremel, weft and the warp work. And so somebody else has done it. I mean, even nobody else does diamond weave in Guatemala, but it's totally common. Like you would see it in lots of things. So that's what I meant. So we haven't done anything that one would really patent. I'm not sure that there's things that are made of home and clothing accessories that one would really patent. Nowadays, maybe chips and out of cotton, no. Yeah.
In our class, we're learning a little bit about import substitution.
Uh-huh.
Would you say that these products, were they better? Or, like, would you say like they were competitive? They have a comparative advantage to like maybe buying something else, or was it a niche? Like, okay, we're buying this from genuinely people who are.
In the United States, so the market that we're in, well, I'm not talking about what I do in the United States here, but in the United States, what we are is a niche of people who value that it's been made by hand. So it's not like you're going to say, I can buy this Walmart cheaper, or I can buy this here cheaper. I'm not selling you something that it's low cost. Our goal is to sell it at a reasonable cost. So there's not a lot of steps on the way. So there doesn't have to be that much margin added on to add to the price, but it's not cheap because we have to pay them fair wages and they have to pay themselves fair wages. And then I pay whatever they tell me I have to pay here. So by the time I get it here, it starts at a level that isn't, if for the people looking for low cost, it's not in that. So it already is a niche market of people who value handmade and of people who value fair trade or whatever, all the other things we call it, all the other words that mean fair trade. So we're in that, that's the market we're in, but it has to be people who put a value on it and are willing to pay that extra price. But import substitution is an interesting idea here too, because the hand weaving in Guatemala as well, especially in the backstrap, which I told you was really time consuming. And so their products that are like on the products we sell that are done in the backstrap are our most expensive products. So they don't get a lot of, like they are not sold a lot. They're sold about people who value that and have the budget to pay for it. But in the, you can see the women in some of the pictures on the screen, they wear beautiful clothing. Their clothing is very expensive, but they'll spend the equivalent of $200 on the blouse, but they'll wear it for thousands of years. And so that's the same thing happens there. And now they're hand woven, backstrap woven clothing is being challenged by import substitution. So there's people coming in and printing those designs on a piece of fabric. And so when you sell it, it's very cheap. And so if you're a poor person, a poor Maya woman, and you don't have a budget for that $200 one, it has to be tempting to buy something. But that is going to eat away at that traditional fabric as well. So
that's why I wanted to ask about too, the factory. Are there, what kind of competitions going on with these cheaper made, factory made kinds of things?
well, it is a competition.
It's probably really hard for them.
Well, I mean, it's the problem of poverty. So if you don't have the money to do it, then it is tempting. I don't see many of them in Kakala, the big ones yet.
Yeah.
Because they still, yeah, Kakala is poor, but man, they eat fresh food. They wouldn't touch something that's old. And they would just save until they could afford the beautiful one. And the one you see me in, the red one with the stripes, that's Kakala's traditional traje, repeal. And it's not beautiful because it's just made out, it used to be made out of wool, now it's just made out of acrylic. It's sewn on a foot loom. They adorn it with embroidery that makes it beautiful, but it's not like the other ones done on the backstrap that are beautiful. So I saw as the women both in the egg project and in the weaving project, as the women started to earn money, their clothing all changed too. So you can see them all blossoming, but they use it for a long time. They don't. No, there's no fast fashion. There's no fast fashion there. So, another question?
So the materials they use for the weaving, where did those come from? Do they spin any of their yarn? Do they dye any of their yarn?
No. No. Reason I laugh is because they did get a training in how to make ICAT, which we call raspeado there, which is a tie-dye thing, but they decided they didn't like doing it. So they don't do it. We buy our yarn from a vendor who dyes it to the colors that we ask for. And I want to start using organic, but for a long time it wasn't available at all. I believe it is available now, but the vendor doesn't use it. So what I need to do is see if they would be willing for us to buy the organic, ship it to them, have them dye it, and then we would at least have organic. I have another, if you want to hear about my yarn story. So I want to sell yarn that's been dyed with non-toxic dyes, right? So we call it azo-free because it's free of whatever chemical azo means. And so, so I told our vendors I want it azo-free. So I want the certificate, show me the certificate. Well, not that long ago, a lab in Europe did testing of our yarn vendors' yarn. And instead of being azo-free, it was like 12%. So then we started on this like, oh my God. I was like, I can't sell this as azo-free. So we talked to a couple of we had 2 vendors at the time. We talked to them, what can you do, what can you do, what can you do? And they didn't do anything. And so we like reinvestigated a lead we've been given a couple years ago about somebody who was starting out being a yarn buyer. And actually they all visited them right after I was there in January. And this guy is totally azo-free. And so we're switching to him. And the sad thing is, it looks like we're trying to cut out the middleman. But the middleman wouldn't help us. And so by the luck that we found, because they protect their line. So I was like, how did you find him? Because of this original connection. So anyway, so now we'll be all right. And now I can go back to working on my
Cotton too? Is it mostly
it's all cotton. We work in all cotton.
I thought, so they grow.
They don't, no, no, I'm sure the organic cotton has to either come from Mexico. The cotton, there was cotton for hundreds of years in Guatemala, but the only cotton that's grown now is like artisanal, the brown one. So some of the women in town do some weaving using it, but it's not an industry. No, our cotton comes from. But hopefully it's not going to poison you.
No, so when the azo, that is that like
It's
with dyes or with?
The azo, because you know when you have a color,
Yeah.
well, I don't know, I'm not expert here, but you put a color in, you need something to fix the
Yes,
color.
right.
And some things that fix it are toxic. And so this whole azo is some term that includes all these toxic things. So we need a certificate that says it's azo free. Azo has a much longer name, but we all call it azo. So, yeah,
That is super fascinating, all the natural dyes, I mean, the plants and the.
we are not natural dyes. We would like to do natural dyes too, but that's another. No, we're not gonna do that. We visited some co-ops that do it, so I'll like to, but it's just a whole nother
Yeah, that's a whole other.
process.
Cultivate the beetles and all that, it's like a whole.
Oh, what they have to do, it's really impressive, so. Other questions? Yeah,
So, what's the relationship between cooperative and Guatemala? Is it competitive or collaborative?
it's collaborative, so. Of the women weaving cooperatives is collaborative, yeah, it's very collaborative. We help each other, they help us. There's not really, even the whole fair trade business is collaborative. I've always enjoyed, in the States, we go to a Fair Trade Federation conference and everybody's sharing, like, the people that are successful share their tips, they give seminars. I had my time in corporate America as well, and it's very different. So it's all about that. And it's not competitive there. I haven't experienced anything. It's more, I feel comfortable saying, hey, we can't do this, a solution. Oh yeah, we can't find this, solution. It's very collaborative.
I'm curious about the discrimination that, this experience is and how they talk about. Because,
Oh, they don't talk about
I'm
it.
sure there's a lot, well, maybe not.
Well, no, sometimes we talk about it. It's the discrimination against the indigenous is unbelievable. I've experienced it just because of being with them, not because they're doing it against me. But when you go to get a paper done by the government, they, they don't tell you how to do it, they make you stand in line for days. I mean, what's the worst is that with some of the people, they've like, uh, it's like they're all, yeah, they've internalized it, thank you. So they think they're not worth anything either, which is really bad. But the discrimination is phenomenal.
That's the majority of the people in that
And it's
country,
the
right?
majority of
It's
the
just-
people. And you technically,
I was gonna ask about the business structure, like the roles of people, like you're doing a little bit of everything, or like are there?
so the people that do the work, like there's a group of seamstresses, a group of backstrap weavers, and a group of equipment weavers. But you're gonna have to come to another lecture to hear the rest of the answer.
It's been regular, so it's pretty good.
We'll do it. Right.
If I just do like a little bit more clarification on like how much they make, like, wages a little bit, I know you.
You have to come back in the middle. I have one whole lecture that's about fair wages.
Question about gender. How do the men feel about the women now being educated and making some money or that? Oh, that was last week too? Well, I'm gonna watch
So,
somebody-
no, in the beginning, I just told the story, in the beginning when the women were working at the egg farm, men came and complained, they didn't think the women should be out of the house.
Right, I know.
But then the 2008 financial crash came, and they returned and said, well, maybe it wasn't such a bad idea, because they were still earning money and there wasn't any work for the guys. So, in that sense, in the sense of the level of machismo is extremely high in co-op. I had men who want to enter into the co-op, and so we made a rule. No men, because as soon as the men come in, they dominate it. So we've done that, and then men have interfered with it, because we had this one backstrap weaver who came crying, she has to resign because she's getting married, and her husband didn't won't let her work. So we get a lot of interference from the male half of
Yeah.
the thing. So yeah, it's a big deal, and not all at night. Any other questions?
Curious about that table, that trip to Antigua sounds really interesting. And the, when I think about that, I just was, just kind of makes me think about, as a first tourist area, like what their experience of that was.
Well,
It didn't sound like it was a very,
when you
experience.
came, did I give my anti-colonial tour of Antigua? Or no? I don't remember, it was too long ago.
I don't think we got on that close. I would have remembered.
I actually dislike Antigua extremely because of the whole colonial thing. So I usually give an anti-colonial tour. Maybe we didn't have time or something like that. But, so the part was good about letting them see the products and the quality of products. But so we had those things where people wanted to take pictures of us. Not me, but
Oh,
of
yeah.
them. And so that really super annoyed me. So then I wanted to I started to take pictures of the tourists. And nobody seemed to be, they didn't get it. Anyway, so, no. I don't know, the discrimination is. I can do this.
My class will get to stay here.
It's from Dagmar, a couple of years ago. Didn't bring it. I don't know if that's like handmade, I have no idea. bring it next time.
It probably is hand woven, right?
Very brilliant colors, blue.
Well, they're all about colors.
Sorry, I'm gonna bring it next time. Thank you very much.
Oh, I have to stop the recording.